evening, ngabe lichona njani? Ngithanda ukubonga mlaleli ngokukhetha umsakazo wakho ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station, on a Wednesday. It's quarter to month end, and I trust that you're making your way to the Zimbabwe Agricultural Show this week if you haven't done so already, or making plans to do so end of this week. Thank you for joining us once again, and welcome to yet another edition of the Gender Agenda. I am your host, Khaya Moyo, and as always, the Gender Agenda is a platform where we shine a spotlight on pressing issues, particularly looking at gender equality and representation in society. I'm excited for today's conversation. So today's conversation is one that sits at the intersection of technology, safety, and the future of media, but particularly looking at women. So the men will excuse us for a bit today. We'll be slightly biased and focus more on women in media and looking at how AI-driven image abuse and algorithmic exploitation is affecting women in media and the safety of female journalists. I'm really excited to be joined by a highly distinguished guest for today. I am joined by James LeMay, also known as Jim. Yeah. He's a former deputy managing editor at CNN. He's a veteran journalist and media strategist with years of experience leading newsrooms and shaping narratives in international media. Jim has worked extensively in editorial leadership, global news coverage, as well as in mentoring journalists across the world. So his insight into both media structures and the evolving technological landscape makes him the perfect guest for our conversation today. Jim, thank you once again for taking time to be with us today.
Well, Khaya, thank you very much. It's very much an honor of mine to be here. My first time, so I'm sort of getting to know everyone and everything, but it's been a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm. And I'll take this moment to officially welcome you to ZiFM Stereo and Zimbabwe. How are you finding Zimbabwe, though?
I love it. I think the people have been warm and generous. I have to be honest, I've enjoyed the food a lot. I've been introduced to a lot of the native dishes that are just spectacular, so I'm having a very good time.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite dish, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot?
The beef stew is pretty spectacular with the bread that comes with it, which is unusual for someone from North America. So combining all that has really been a joy.
Awesome. So Suzanne, your host, has been doing quite a great job for that. But getting into our conversation today, so you've worked at the highest levels of international media. What is your assessment of the current media landscape, particularly if we're going to look at it in the context of AI and the safety and protection of women?
I think we're at a crossroads. I think that women have always been a target, unfortunately, whenever they decided to come forward and join the media landscape and get the training necessary and break that sort of glass barrier that was forever held by just men. Once women made their impression around the world, it was clearly this is something we should have done a long time ago. Unfortunately, coming with that became all the scrutiny and sometimes the criticism that was unwarranted. That's before AI. That was even before social media. So imagine social media now adding the added pressure and the added scrutiny for women that is frankly uncalled for, and often it leads to some violence. AI, unfortunately, then allows the ordinary person with a laptop or a phone to be able to manipulate a picture or a photograph of, say, a female reporter or anchor or presenter, and then make that person look horrible in many circumstances, bringing all kinds of negative things toward her, and frankly, sometimes violence comes with it. So we have to find ways to sort of curb that. We have to find ways to protect women so they can just do their jobs, right? And there are some things we can talk about to do that are practical, but it's going to take managers, and sometimes women themselves are going to have to take a proactive approach.
Maybe just to create a context and for people to understand the extent to which this is a concern. Someone may be like, AI, media, women, what is the link and how prevalent is this issue, and why is it an issue to be concerned about and address?
It's prevalent. It's becoming more and more prevalent, I would say that. Let's just all talk about AI for a minute, right, to get some concepts for your audience. Most of us are using ChatGPT. It's become a very common tool for many people that are not in the media, but just ordinary folks. Imagine then that takes the extra level of being able to manipulate through software a person's photograph, a person's video, and then we talk deep fakes. This is so easy to create a fictitious person. I think of the example of President Obama, who was seen allegedly saying certain things, later turned deep fake. Imagine being able to do that with a women presenter or a reporter who's on camera, who had no idea her image was being used in this fashion. And that the scary part is that's so easy to do that you can go on YouTube, and I don't mean to direct people this way, but that's how common it is, and get instructions on how to do it. And it's free. The software is often not charged. So it puts women at risk more than we can imagine, versus just the harassing phone calls and the harassing emails are bad enough. Now their image can be taken, their voice can be captured, and the audience is left with, is this really her or not? And obviously she has to come out and defend herself first in many cases, and then worst case, there are those people who take bad actions against her.
You mentioned deepfakes. What are maybe some of the other emerging risks that we're starting to see because of the advent of AI?
Some of the other risks are, I mentioned briefly, the cloning of your voice. We're on radio right now, so voice is very important. In 3 seconds, and I've been with the technicians that do this, they can capture your voice, manipulate it, and then use it to say things you didn't say, or use it to do bad things by using your voice, like getting someone to give them money, or someone to take advantage of where you live and find information about you by using your voice, or what sounds like your voice, very clearly, sometimes hard to tell. So that's a new wrinkle, but really it's been around about 2 years. So deepfakes are probably the greatest manipulation of just video that we get through our social media contacts and online. But voice has now become that element of where you pick up a phone call and you take it from someone you certainly think is the real person, and it's not, and it leads to a lot of negative stuff.
And we're focusing on women, and think it's important for us to just explain or demonstrate how women are disproportionately affected by all of these threats that are being caused by AI.
Statistics show that deep fakes are being targeted at more women. 98% of the targets of deep fakes are women, and it's usually related to pornography, unfortunately. That's a staggering statistic that puts women at risk regardless of the situation. So that by itself is an alarm bell that should go off. I think governments and I think organizations, media organizations, have to take greater effort of creating policies and protections for women who appear on air and on camera. Starting with government, let's talk about it briefly. I think there needs to be laws that protect the image and the voice of every woman, man included, men and women included, but women in particular, that if you take a gender violent approach to the legislation, that it has a higher degree of criminal penalties that could ultimately lead to putting you in jail. Until we sort of make this a very strong statement that if you take these kinds of actions against women, in particular women in media or women in general, but clearly against women, it has a higher penalty.
And you're alluding to the legal framework there, but is it not difficult to govern something like technology that's constantly evolving? We can have a law today, and then tomorrow the landscape has totally changed. We were probably going to be battling something totally different that we were not prepared for. So what would your suggestion be there in terms of the regulation, and what type of policies maybe would we need to implement?
I think you start with service and protection, protect and serve. The government should take their role of protecting women as best they can with what the laws allow them to do and how they can track down criminals. That means you're going to have to probably create a group of men and women that are highly technically savvy, to be honest, that know how to discover these individuals and track them down and keep track of the new technology changes so the law can evolve as the technology evolves. You can't expect ordinary people to sort of understand this. You've got to have people who are trained in this fashion, educated in this, that can identify. And then finally, I think it's appropriate, especially national governments, not just local, work with the technology companies to make sure that they're putting in safeguards as well. This isn't about freedom of speech, which is often the argument. This is about harming others through the manipulation of their image. So I think it's correct that we should be talking to technology companies at the highest level of national government and saying it's not acceptable. They have to make changes, or we can penalize them as well.
7:15, you are tuned in to the Gender Agenda on ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. We're in conversation with Jim LeMay, former Deputy Managing Editor at CNN, and we're speaking about the gendered impact of AI on the media. If you have any contributions to make, maybe have some questions, you need some clarity on some of the issues we're discussing today, please feel free to drop your feedback via WhatsApp, and the number to do so is 0772 168 045. Jim is here to answer any questions that you may have around AI and its impact on the media. And of course, because this is the gender agenda, we are looking at this from a gendered lens. Jim, let's get a bit technical and look into the algorithms. Is there any bias that the algorithm poses
Yes.
when we're looking at the context of our conversation?
Short answer, yes. And let me kind of back up and explain how this works, right? So ChatGPT is the one that more commonly everyone is aware of. I don't want to get into other areas people might not be familiar. It scrapes the internet for information. So if there's information out there that's incorrect, it collects it without correcting it. If you put in a prompt in there and say, I want to know X, Y, and Z, it's going to scrape the internet to find that answer, even with some of the wrong information, and feed it into you. So it's a bit garbage in, garbage out. If you don't vet it or correct it or know the difference, you're just passing on misinformation. It's the same with bias. If there's articles out there or information out there that tends to lean more, and most of the studies show that there are more bias against women than there are men, it tends to collect that information, send it out without correcting it. So it's on our responsibility to make those corrections to make sure that we're not just passing on bad information from place to place.
And how does this bias in the algorithm downplay or silence women's voices in the media?
The best example is, and I think it's the one that most of us can understand, if you watch your local stations or even national, but local stations, local radio, TV, see how many women are interviewed that are experts in any particular field versus men. That's a very real bias. When you just see the voices of only men being asked and only men being brought on air or brought into a studio and no women or very few women, that's a bias that most people don't really physically understand. When they see it, it illustrates you that you're silencing women's voices. We're not allowing women of equal status to have input into some very key issues.
If you have any questions, like I said, you can get in touch with us on our WhatsApp platforms. Do you have any maybe case studies or examples to illustrate, what we've been talking about, the manipulation of images, the deep fakes, the voice cloning, and so forth?
Yes, there were several examples. In Pakistan, for example, 2 female anchors, presenters, their images were manipulated, they were taken advantage of, and it led to one of them being assaulted. And she had no idea what was going on. Once it was discovered, the media company actually reached out to the technology companies and they took those down. And they started creating safeguards so that this couldn't be manipulated again. In parts of Denmark and Sweden, they're looking at laws that say it is criminal, a criminal act, to take my image without my permission and my voice included and manipulate it in any way. That's something I think is important for us to understand, that going forward you should take possession of what is yours and not let anyone take advantage of it without penalty.
And maybe let's just unpack some of the barriers. In terms of structural barriers, you've already alluded to it briefly, but maybe you can just unpack it for us to really have a sense of the real issues in terms of the barriers.
Yeah, the barriers for women are, in the past it was a male-dominated society. Still is to a certain degree. I think more women are getting advantages that they didn't have before. But the barriers in terms of technology really boil down to there's that lack of data that's available, and that's been proven in research over and over again, that there hasn't been enough studies or input by women in terms of normal stories, advertising, etc., so that when we do seek out to the internet for answers, all we're getting is a male response and male-dominated issues. So I think it's clear to most of us that we've got to take a greater effort in including more women in the process. BBC, for example, created the 50-50 rule for a while. They've instituted that 50% of the people on air as experts had to be men and 50% had to be women, and it couldn't be one dominant over the other. That's bold and pretty aggressive, and I think that's the way we have to go in the future.
Do you think that's practical in an African context?
I think you have to make the effort. I think you didn't get where you are today because we thought it was practical. We did it because we needed to do it. I think sometimes practicality, and we kind of make excuses for not doing things, if it makes sense. We find a reason not to do it. We have to come to our senses and say, we're becoming a very modern technological world. We have to make sure that we're all on equal footing. If you don't, eventually, modern media, as we know it today, TV, newspaper, etc., will go away when people will create their own media. So we have to be careful that we're answering to the constituency, the people that believe in us.
There's also the aspect of citizen journalism, where an ordinary person, as long as I've got a smartphone, I essentially can report breaking news that's happening in my backyard or down the street.
Yep.
How is that also affecting maybe the role of women in media, especially with all this technology?
Yep, I think that there's not enough women, I'll be honest with you, I'm speaking to women out there now, that are taking on that role. I think they can, because they have that mobile phone, with some training, and university is not necessarily the opposite way you should go. You can always have university in addition to learning from mentors, in addition from learning to other women, supporting each other. Create a network where you have a voice, where your phone can be that citizen journalist. I've encouraged in every place I go that more women should get engaged in citizen journalism and be out there using their voice, collecting information and bringing it to the main media and making them see for themselves the sort of things that are going on in communities that are somewhat overlooked. I think there's a lot of groups and organizations overlooked by the main media that citizen journalists could be the people collecting that information.
Interesting point there. What do you think would need to be done to strengthen that? Especially if we look at just even in mainstream media, the representation of women it's way below the averages that we would expect. And then now we're going to something that is an informal sort of journalism.
We are a little bit. I think what we're going to is you're still going to have very, very educated people who are experienced that should be making the final decisions on publication. This shouldn't just be something done loosely, because journalists are respected by their credibility and their trust. We trust their credibility, and that's what their value is to the rest of the people. The key here for me is if I ask people, if I train them and I ask them to provide content to me, right, and I approach more women in this process than men, I still have control over the content. I still have to determine what is proper and what should go on air and what should not, right? So those should be done by a staff of people, experienced, and know professionally what to do. But training citizens and ordinary people who are already, by the way, doing this by themselves to their own groups, I think is just one of the key components of how to get more voices on the air.
We have a contribution from a listener who would like to be anonymous, and they say that I'm not sure about AI. I feel like it's going to take over a lot of our jobs.
There are some jobs that are in jeopardy in the media world. One is graphic artists. I think we have to be honest about that there's been, with Canva and other sources, it's becoming so easy to create graphics. The second that may be in jeopardy is, frankly, editors, because you can use your laptop to edit most anything. It's more easy to do that than it ever was. So there are some honest challenges that we're going to have to talk about. What won't go away are reporters and people that go out and collect news and gather news and bring it back. And editors, meaning supervisors, people with strong editorial backgrounds that decide what goes on and what doesn't. And your presenters really aren't in trouble either. Our studies show when you have a AI presenter, it's fascinating for a while, but it loses favor because it has no credibility. It's not someone I can connect to because it's not real. I think that's just kind of a novelty, and there are some ways to use avatars. I'll give you an example. A Nigerian anchor came up with the idea. She said, look, I have many languages within our country that I can't speak at the same time, of course. She created an avatar that looked like her, that while she was speaking English, the avatar, you could zoom in on the avatar, and it was speaking the other languages that people wanted to hear. But it was an image of her, and she felt that was the best way to serve her audience that has multiple languages. It was a brilliant idea, but she controlled it, and it's how technology helped others who felt underserved. So I'm of a strong belief that AI, the one we're talking about, is a tool. Don't let it overcome your creativity. But the person's asking about the loss of jobs, yes. And I think that it's not so much the loss of the job, it's the loss of the way you used to do that job. Now you're going to have to adjust and pivot and make the AI work for you and not let it overcome you.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I think it's a perfect trajectory to then get into the opportunities. We've sort of been focusing more on the negatives,
yes,
and the threats, the emerging risks. What are the opportunities that exist, particularly for women in media? How can they utilize AI to improve themselves, to be better at their jobs?
We've talked about some of it. Graphics suddenly become easier, so that as you did digital reporting, you've got statistics can now look very interesting and make it more appealing. Second, we talked about editing, being able to capture a story of very great power and edit it yourself literally on your phone at your kitchen table is perfectly appropriate. So that and it's free technology at this stage. That means you have the power to make stories more compelling through that technology. But won't be replaced as the following. You've got to be in your community, finding those people that are underserved, helping make a difference in people's lives still becomes the most important mission of a journalist. Women should empower themselves to know that they have equal value and have the equal right to do that. And lastly, let me say, if you have a YouTube channel, you can create your own TV station. There's nothing stopping you from that, and build an audience on your own that can follow you, and that where you can make a difference with those individuals that are making the effort to find you and be a part of your world.
With your experience in international media from a global perspective, looking into Africa, what other opportunities do you think exist? What do you think we can learn? There's always this big emphasis on learning exchange with the West, or the global North with the global South.
I think that there's sort of two worlds that are colliding. One is the Silicon Valley and the other parts of the United States and other parts of the world, but certainly it's centered there, we're in this industrial age of rapid technology happening so quickly it's hard to keep up with it. I think that the top leaders in the media society here in Africa need to partner with that group. They need to have some input into that. And that technology group we're talking about, the Googles and others, are open to that. This is not like they've shut the doors, closed the windows and said no one can come in. No, they actually want people to be a part of this process. But you have to be proactive. They're not going to find you, you're going to have to find them. And this is a challenge for all of us. The more proactive we are, the better we can control our lives. Technology is being designed sometimes behind closed doors because people are trying to work rapidly at being competitive, but they're open to input, they're open to other voices, but they're not going to seek it. I'll be honest, you're going to have to seek them out.
And in terms of data sovereignty, do you think there should be there's a need for some of our African governments to maybe focus more on creating our own platforms similar to because most of these technologies are developed in the global North. Very little is, maybe we just improve on what's already there. Is there a need, do you feel, for us to develop our own platforms that are solely for us? I
think the platforms I would focus on if I'm in the African region, especially here, is the ones that require different languages. I think sometimes those get the last thing that the technology companies end up doing. You could be the leader on, let's make sure there are certain languages that get the right kind of treatment and can be developed and created online by the African people. Don't wait for that North American person to show up and say, oh, by the way, we forgot this language, but we've got this language. I think it's proper for that, where I would put my technology ideas and dollars, is developing those languages that tend to get ignored in the broader process.
Our time it's almost 7:30. We will stretch a bit. I'll still into a bit of the time for the platform. I hope my boss is not listening right now, because I will be in trouble. But anyway, sometimes rules are meant to be broken. So you've started talking about some of the opportunities that exist. Since we've already been having a conversation around the learning exchanges, sort of. Do you think there's room for international collaborations and policy reforms to create safer environments online?
I think it's critical. I'll be very blunt. We have to start now. This technology will not stop. We're just starting to see the beginnings of it, right? And if we don't get our arms around how we protect each other, what kind of guardrails we can create, and start having those conversations today, before long you'll be overwhelmed by this technology, and bad actors are going to do bad things. So we have to find ways to protect those vulnerable people, and in this case we're talking about women in the media. But we could be talking about women in general as well. But regardless, we're talking women in politics. I mean, anywhere you're exposed to the public, you have the chance to be taken advantage of. We have to start those conversations now. I think if you wait till the technology's here, it's too late.
Mm-hmm. So I guess in terms of policy, in terms of governance, like you alluded to earlier, it's more of protect and serve. But internally within the newsrooms, what do you think media houses can start to do?
I think media houses need to start auditing, take a very strong look at what they're doing now, and look if there actually is representation for women in the general public, for starters. And what is the representation of women within our own newsrooms, and have an honest conversation about that. The more we can show a diverse population that we are more reflective of who they are, which is really what it means, local media should be reflective of its local communities. If we look that there's a gender bias, it starts there, because that tends to look like We don't represent all of us, only part of us, and I think that you can change as early as tomorrow if you're honest about it.
In terms of training, what training, what capacitation, what empowerment would be needed to be done going into the future?
Training is going to be critical. I'm glad you brought it up. Training is probably the one thing we all forget, right? We get the technology, we play with it, we get to use it. We realize we need to reflect our community so we have more women of color, we have more women in general. But the problem is they don't get trained properly on how to manage that technology, and they don't get trained properly on how to interact with that and the community in general. Plus, the other half I don't see much of is how to better enlighten the public. Here's a deep fake thing, and here's why, and here's the technology we used. If we can better train the public or educate the public to understand it so they can do it for themselves, everybody wins in that case.
And what safeguards can be put up from a technological perspective? Is there anything that these tech companies can do?
There's some algorithms that, and let me just say that when they've been challenged, they've changed their algorithms. And I think that's the key here, is being proactive. If you sit back and just let it roll over you and say nothing, then nothing happens. If you raise a lot of issues and take it directly to those companies, they'll make the changes that seem necessary. So I think it's going to take some time, without question. It won't happen overnight. Algorithms don't get changed instantly, but you have to make some noise.
And as we wrap up our conversation, Jim, from your experience, your vast experience over the years, what would be your call to action to create a safer space for women in media amid all this technological advancement?
I think it's twofold. For women who work in the media, I think their managers need to have a strong conversation that says, how can we better protect you online? For example, taking down some of the personal information, eliminating some of the pictures if it's their choice of their children and dogs and things where they can be used sadly against them. So in the media houses, there has to be a strong understanding of safety and security. In the legislature, you heard me say, we need to start building laws that protect and take care of women, especially women in the media, and especially women that get exposed to the public, so that their likeness and their images can't be used in a way that's, frankly, is going to harm them. And then when they do, create laws that have strong criminal reactions to it. You will get punished pretty severely if you do this.
Jim, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today. Would have loved to explore this conversation further, but I think, what we've managed to cover has been quite insightful. I'll thank you once again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to have this important conversation with us. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to Sizani Weza, who's with the U.S. Embassy Harare's Public Diplomacy Section, for making today's conversation possible. And to you, our listener, thank you so much for choosing ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station this evening. This has been the Gender Agenda, and I'm your host, Khaya Moyo. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.